Hello everybody, my name is Jim and welcome back to another Spanish Chat. In this Spanish Chat we're going to speak with Zoe Smith, who is a very experienced editor, not only within ELT but also in academic writing. We spoke about how many hours she's been a paid editor for, and it worked out to be something like 10,000 paid hours as an editor. She has worked for over 20 years with ELT. And she's done numerous courses and is an expert in her field. It was really interesting to look at and listen to her speak about the editing world and how many different roles there are and how each of them are slightly different, and these differences are important, especially for people that are perhaps if you're looking to move into editing in some way. Zoe was also kind enough to provide us with a very long list of pieces of advice. So I think that you're going to find this very useful if this is something that you're interested in. It's definitely, Zoe's made clear that it's not for everyone, but for those that do enjoy it, there's certainly opportunities out there. As usual, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. If you do like this video, please give us a like, give us a thumbs up, and of course, we'd love it if you could subscribe. I have a number of Spanish chats for this to finish off July, but then I'll be taking a break over August, and hopefully we have some more lined up for September, moving into 2022. But until then, enjoy the chat, let us know what you think, comment, get in touch if you'd like, and I'll see you for the next one. Okay, take care. Good afternoon, Zoe. How are you doing?
Hi, Jim. It's nice to see you. I'm doing fine. How about you?
Good. We were just talking before about the heat in the UK at the moment. It's very hot here in Spain, very hot in the UK. So I hope that you're surviving.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I need to ask the viewers to perhaps forgive me if they start seeing beads of sweat falling across the camera. So it is unusually hot here.
I love what obviously we hear, of heat waves happening in the UK. Like, I'm Australian, so the hot weather is kind of natural for me, and we kind of always laugh. But like you said before, having this heat in the UK is very rare. So hopefully everyone's safe. In the tube and in the metro, it must be absolutely disgusting. I remember when I was living in London, and there's no air conditioning there. I'm not sure if that's changed.
I don't think so. I think people still just have the strategy of like opening all the doors, windows, so you get all that dust blowing in and the heat at the same time.
Perfect. Amazing. All right, brilliant. Well, like I said before, thank you very much for being here. It's really lovely to have you here. So also for the people that are listening or watching, you and I have we've worked back and forth on some things that are coming out in the future, and so it's lovely to have you here online face to face, as it were. Before we get into it, I'd like to go through obviously the purpose of Spanish Chats. Why we're here. So it all started with a question, really. The question was, how did I get into teacher training? And from there, I've realized that for teacher trainers, but also for materials developers, editors, publishers, managers, the route's very different. And I've realized that whilst for most people, teaching is where it stops within ELT. But for a number of us, and for people that want to stay in the industry, there are many different sort of routes that people can take. And the idea of Spanish Chats is to give teachers insights into how they might take them, looking at other people's stories, such as yourselves. So without further ado, hopefully we can push the focus on to Zoe. So Zoe, would you like to tell us about you? Who is Zoe professionally?
Sure. Well, I'll avoid the sort of deep psychoanalytic Freudian details, but in terms of what I do, so currently I work as a freelance editor and writer for different publishers, and in fact I've just reached my 10,000 hour of paid editing work. So I think that's quite a milestone to reach. I'm not sure everyone else has got to that point yet. So yeah, so most of my work is in ELT, but I've also branched into academic editing. So I've been in ELT for quite a long time at this point. So, you know, I'm a little bit tired by sentences such as, you know, there's some water, there isn't any milk. So academic edit, well, you know what I mean, you know, you're teaching younger learners, that's always in every book, isn't it? So so yeah, I'm a little bit tired of those kind of sort of sentences and basic concepts. I've got a lot more into academic editing. That's also supported by university teaching. So alongside my freelance editing and writing work, I teach. Sorry, I just forgot about the microphone. I should have checked the mic here. Does it all sound clear at your end?
Yeah, no, we can hear everything perfectly.
Okay, yeah. So I teach during the summers. Actually, I'm about to start teaching at the end of this week. So I teach on pre-sessional courses, and that's helped to support my academic editing as well as helping to support my ELT work. So it all sort of feeds into each other. So yeah, a mix of teaching, writing, editing. I started out in the publishing sector as an acquisitions editor for a publisher in Korea. And then I became a commissioning editor at Macmillan in Oxford. But then the whole company moved to London. So I had a couple of years in London. And then I decided to go freelance. So yeah, I had quite a bit of in-house experience before being freelance. And then prior to that, I was a teacher myself. So I taught for about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years in different countries. So it's all kind of interconnected. But yeah, I've gone through or gone along a slightly different path, perhaps, to some others.
What were your motivations? Obviously, you said that you started off as a teacher, and you were doing the standard, if you will, travel around and teach by the sounds of things. What were the motivations to move into editing?
Sure, it's an interesting one. Well, I mean, it wasn't so much a motivation, it was actually a pure accident as to how this happened. So I had to stop teaching because of health issues. So I sort of ran into a bit of an issue of like, you know, what do I do next? I can't physically teach full-time permanently. So what's next for me? So my initial idea was perhaps to return to Korea, where I'd been previously. And I thought, I want to go back to university teaching there, because a lot of contracts you only have like between 10 and 15 hours of work a week. So I thought that's a good balance for my personal circumstances. You know, I can't teach young learners anymore. My health isn't good enough for that. So I actually started interviewing with universities, and I had all the paperwork in hand. And then it was just a complete chance encounter and a sort of bizarre series of events that I got offered a job in a publishing company. And I thought, because I already knew what it was like to work in a Korean company. You know, if you ever sort of had any experience of like corporate Asia, you're in an office for like, I don't know, 15 plus hours a day. You generally don't get any annual leave. You might get up to 10 days a year if you're lucky. The conditions are pretty harsh. So I hesitated, but then I thought, well, if I go back to teaching, I'm just doing the same thing. And I'm always conscious of trying to, you know, do something a bit more, try and expand my skill set and experience. And I thought, well, I'm quite interested in the idea of creating books. And plus the issue was, I mean, the pay was a lot more than in teaching. So I think as teachers, you know, salary is a key issue. And I think as you go along, you have to become a bit more realistic about your financial circumstances. So, okay, you're in your 20s, you're sort of backpacking and teaching, you're on basically a minimum wage. I think as you get a bit older, you need to think a bit more seriously about how your finances are going to pan out. So by going into publishing, that was also another way of suddenly like doubling my salary overnight. So that was a big draw. So all of those factors sort of led to me ending up in publishing, which actually turned out to be quite a good thing, even though it was a little bit tough to start with.
Was it as you sort of envisioned it, doing the 15-hour days, long? Like, yeah, okay, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, I typically did about an hour of overtime in the office. I generally left about 7 p.m. And the others were working until like 9 or 10 p.m. And because I left early, there was resentment there. So there were a lot of issues to deal with. But I mean, I just couldn't physically do those like 10, 12, 15-hour days every day. I mean, I just don't know how people do it. So it was an incredibly tough job, both physically and mentally. But it set me up for publishing. So because of that experience, I just knew pretty much everything about how to produce an ELT textbook. So that provided really good basis for continuing in the publishing sector.
Brilliant, excellent. Wow, I mean, that's, as you said, a chance encounter, and then it's gone from there. I mean, you've 10,000 hours of paid editing. That's a lot. I don't even know how many hours are in a year, and to get my calculator out and work that out. But that's quite a substantial amount. And from your blog, I mean, you have your portfolio of some of the projects that you've worked on, and it's quite a substantial list there. There's quite a lot on there. So I mean, you've moved into editing. You've gone through teaching. You've gone into editing, and we're going to look at some of your perhaps some of the things that you've done along the way. I mean, you've also done an MA in language teaching or TESOL. I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you knew about that. So yeah, I mean, that was already over 10 years ago. So I got the MA in applied linguistics. I did that through the Open University, so I was still working full time when I got that. But yeah, that's been a big help as well.
Right, and you also did Delta, right? You did your Delta.
Well, I did module 1, and I came a bit unstuck with module 3, and I decided to just leave it there. So I mean, it's not a qualification I need. It was just kind of something extra. I think it's always important to set yourself some goals, and that was the goal for that year, to try and get the Delta, but it didn't quite happen. But hey ho, I'm okay with that.
No, brilliant. I mean, the MA module 1 in itself is a big undertaking. And is that something that you'd like to complete in the future then?
I've assessed it all. I think for me, I think the expense of it, I mean, it's a huge expense doing the module 2, that's the teaching component. I mean, that's a few £1,000s as it is, plus just the intensity of that module. I think it's not going to be worth it in terms of outcomes for me doing that. So I think it would be good if I wanted to move into teacher training, but that's not going to be something I'm planning to move into.
Brilliant, excellent. So I imagine along the way, you obviously love what you do, but I imagine you've encountered certain challenges along the way. Are there any that sort of come to mind as the big hurdles that you've had to come over or had to jump over? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think if you're a teacher looking to go into publishing, I think the first thing that will strike you is that, I mean, I think a lot of people teach because they like the sort of communicative element, they like the interaction and the dynamism with working with students. But obviously in publishing, you could be spending at least 9 hours a day in front of a computer with very little interaction with people. So even if you're working in an office, you might sort of say, well, hi there, good morning, do you want some tea? And that could be all your interaction with people for the whole day. So I think that's a bit of a shock to the system if you just come straight out of teaching. So yeah, I mean, I think, as a freelancer, that's partly why I teach in the summer, so I could sort of mix things up a bit. But obviously, if you're working in-house on a permanent in a permanent role, you can't just take the summer off to do something a bit different. You know, you're tied to that desk job, as it were. So that is a challenge. And I mean, yeah, there are other ones. So I think another one that might strike people as a bit strange is that, you know, just because you're an English teacher, you might not be a good proofreader. I think, you know, you have to face up to the reality that actually proofreading and editing requires quite a bit of training. It takes time to develop as a proofreader and editor. So just because your first language is English, it doesn't automatically make you good at that. So I think an important way to overcome that is to, you know, recognize if you're actually good at proofreading and editing. And if not, you might be able to consider other roles within publishing. So maybe that's something we can discuss a bit later on. So we might discuss some of the different roles available. And I think another key challenge, I mean, the biggest one is like volume overload. So if you're in the midst of a busy project, you could be getting in hundreds of files from all over the place. So you've really got to sort of keep your wits about you and be very organized. And I think, not all teachers are organized people. I think a lot of teachers are quite sort of spontaneous and sort of organic, as it were. But in publishing, you have to be very disciplined and organized and be very good at time management. So that's a different, that's a type of challenge I don't think you get so much in teaching. And yeah, with that, I think you need to manage your own well-being, and you know, that's relevant to being a teacher as well. So if you're in a really busy teaching position, you know, just as in publishing where you've got a huge workload, you have to recognize and take care of your mental well-being as well as your physical well-being. So I think that's something that individuals need to think more about as they go along.
Interesting.
And I think maybe the other one is, well, if you want to work in publishing, you probably need to relocate to a particular location. So, you know, in the UK, nearly all the jobs are in Oxford, Cambridge, or London. There are a few based elsewhere, but you know, you really need to move to where the jobs are if you want to get started in a publishing company. At least that's what I would say.
Right. Just on a few of those points, you say that obviously if publishers are looking for like ELT publishers, do they generally look for editors or people looking to move into publishing from a teaching background, or are there, for example, editors and publishers within ELT that haven't been teachers before?
Yeah, so it all depends. So I think with the main ELT publishers that we know, if you are wanting to work in an editing role, then they will require some teaching experience. So, you know, I mean, some people I know just had like one summer school's experience and then broke into editing. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but it is really desirable. I mean, you need to demonstrate knowledge of the industry and how teachers are going to use the materials that you're developing. So, you know, it is an important skill. However, there are other roles in publishing, in a publishing house, that don't necessarily require teaching experience. So if we take, for example, project management, so a project manager is needed in every publishing project. So they might be responsible for the schedules. So they will organize the schedules, say that we can deliver, you know, X and X component or X and Y component to certain dates. They will set up like things like the typesetters. They will set up recording studio bookings. So, you know, none of that needs any knowledge of ELT teaching specifically. So it depends on the role. But yeah, I mean, that project management role, maybe that's something teachers haven't considered before. And that's quite transferable to other companies as well. So project management skills are in demand across multiple sectors. It doesn't have to be an ELT or ELT publishing, but that's something that some people find they get hooked on that, and that becomes their niche. So yeah, that's something else teachers could consider.
Brilliant. Now you mentioned also, perhaps teachers themselves, if they are good at editing and proofreading, so on, there is a need to obviously build on that skill set. And from my understanding, there are a number of courses or proof editing or copy editing courses that are available. I mean, imagine from your blog, it seems like you've done quite a substantial amount of training in this area. Are these things worthwhile for teachers that are looking to move into editing, or are they sort of only for the professionals doing it for sort of a long time? What's your recommendation there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two routes into this. So, if you're looking to move in-house and work within a publishing company, in the interview, you will be given a test, an editing test. So they'll be looking to see your comments about that text. They will be looking, maybe you need to make some markups where you're changing some of the language. So you'll be given an editing test, and that will be the basis of selection if you're going to work in-house for a publishing company. So you don't necessarily need to have a lot of editing training to do that kind of test. You just need to have the awareness and know-how. So when you're working in-house, you will be a development editor, or you might be a development editor, and your role would be more about quality assurance and checking that ideas fit the concept. So you won't be bogged down with doing lots of proofreading and copy editing. That will be outsourced to the freelancers. So if you're in the in-house role, training and editing, you don't actually get much of it in-house. It's just something that sort of might coincidentally occur. But yeah, if you're going on to be a freelance editor, then it's important to, again, I think it's just about setting yourself goals as a freelancer. I mean, as a freelancer, you can end up like drifting and not really having a lot of focus. So I think it's important to think, okay, well, this year I'm going to aim towards, reading this book or taking that course, and sort of incrementally building it up. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of textbooks available quite inexpensively on editing that you can get. And there are some organizations and courses that you can take some short certified courses with. I mean, they're not essential to getting work. I think it's more about your own sense of personal development. But I mean, they can potentially add a few strings to your bows, and could perhaps make you a bit more competitive. But I think more than anything, it's the experience. Just having practical hands-on experience is much more valuable than taking an editing course. But yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend supplementing any editing with reading books or taking training courses as time goes by.
Brilliant. So before we get into sort of the advice section, I have a few more questions. I suppose you mentioned freelancing, and you've obviously worked for companies for many years, and then you made the decision to go freelance. What were the motivations behind that? And I mean, is it worthwhile in a sense? I mean, imagine if you're still doing it, it's there must be pros and cons of going freelance, I suppose.
Yeah, so I mean, there were a set of circumstances, but yeah, I was with Macmillan at the time. I really loved working for Macmillan for my first year in their Oxford office, but then they relocated to London, so I was never really sort of vested in the London scene.
Right.
Plus, I had a partner who lived outside of London, so I mean, sort of every fortnight I was commuting to and fro, and there was just a set of circumstances in the office that it just told me that I need to get out of this position. I just don't know how I can solve or resolve the circumstances there. So I decided to go freelance. I had no plan for it. I didn't really know what was going to happen. But yeah, I started freelancing, and thankfully it's all worked out. Thankfully the work has just kind of snowballed in. It's been remarkable. I've been very, very lucky in that sense. But yeah, I mean, there have been certain challenges, and I think it was about maybe 6 months into freelancing, I woke up and I thought, crikey, it's like I'm running my own business. It's like I'm managing a business. Like I need to manage a business. So that was a actual kind of realization moment that I realized that, you know, I need to treat this seriously. I want to create some kind of sort of brand image. I want to create a website. I need to raise my profile. So I need to be sort of seen, as it were. I mean, it's not like showing off or, you know, I don't know, posting 100 times a day on, say, LinkedIn, but you need to have some sort of visibility. Otherwise, no one's ever going to know that you're there offering services. So yeah, thinking about the practicalities of being in business. So, you know, you're marketing yourself. So you need to develop some marketing acumen. You need to think about finances. So you need to sort of think about, well, which jobs are going to bring me in more money, which jobs are going to prove more advantageous for the longer term.
Right.
And there's a whole thing around time management. So yeah, the thing is, your whole life just suddenly gets determined by deadlines. So that's what it feels like. That's a real sort of toughness about working, in particular with editing. So the deadlines are really tough. And I think, yeah, going back again to that issue about mental health. So I know I'll put a shout out to Rachel Roberts, who runs a fantastic group for ELT professionals in the area of sort of mindfulness and well-being. That's become quite a big area, as I mentioned before. So you need to think about the impact of all these deadlines just constantly going on and on through your week. And I think that the idea that freelance is, you know, you're free and you can work from a beach, you know, somewhere, that's really a myth if you're to take this seriously. So I mean, for example, can you imagine working on your laptop on a beach? You know, you've got the sun shining on a screen, you've got a reference, you know, answer keys, audio scripts, a teacher's book, an online component all at once. So that's not practical.
It's doable, Zoe. It's doable. We'll make it work. Okay, we'll make it work.
I think I just need to put a green. Like if I had a green screen of a beach or something, that might compensate in part. So yeah, freelance isn't free. It is pretty tough going to make it work, and you know, you don't have a consistent income from month to month. So if you're teaching with a school, you know, you're going to get a fixed salary every month. You're going to get a fixed holiday allowance. But yeah, planning for holidays is nearly impossible. So yeah, you've got to sort of think about, you've got to maybe sort of change your business as you change or as time goes along to make this work. So yeah, it's tougher than it looks.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you mentioned before, for example, blogging, and obviously you've done the MA and a number of other qualifications. I mean, maybe if we can focus on two specifically, the MA and blogging. The MA, do you think the MA at all helped you become an editor? I imagine, at least in terms of technical knowledge for language teaching, it must have, and applied linguistic, it must have helped with that, I imagine. With editing, not so much. I'm not sure.
I'll let you into a secret. So no, it hasn't.
Right.
No, it's been really great for getting my foot into interviews. I can tell you that. But I think you know, I mean, the MA was taken a long time ago now. I took it more than 10 years ago, and I think, you know, this issue can happen with teachers as well. You can have really experienced teachers, but they just run out of ideas. They don't have the fresh ideas. So you can have like a really young teacher who has only got the CELT like a year or two ago, and they could be really great because they're energized, got lots of new ideas. They don't necessarily have all the sort of theory behind them, but they can really make it work. So I think the same has been in my case, that, you know, the MA now is a bit old hat. It was useful for me because I think, well, my undergraduate degree was in architecture, so I didn't have to read a single book on that course. So academically, I was a bit lacking. So the MA sort of brought a bit more sort of academicism into my life, as it were, and it just provided a good sort of hook to get into interviews. But I would say, I could have done without it professionally. I could have managed. It hasn't been essential for that. And I think if you look at the authors of ELT course books, the first thing you're not going to look at are their qualifications. No one cares about the qualifications. It's can they write a good book?
Yeah.
Can editors edit well? Qualifications become a bit immaterial at the end of the day.
Right. Interesting. And your blog or your experience blogging, I'm not sure if you saw that. Maybe you participated. I sent out a questionnaire some time ago about blogging in ELT, not just for teachers. I was corrected on that, but at ELT professionals. And one of the questions was, has your blog helped with employment, or has it sort of helped you present yourself to employers? Not in the sense that it's gotten you a job, but that it's been one of those tools that you could bring to the interview. Would you say that the blog has helped in that respect?
I think the key thing in my case is, as you mentioned, calling it like a tool. So I think it's been useful. For example, if I've had some client query, then it's been really useful just to point them to the portfolio page. So you mentioned the portfolio page at the beginning. So that's just really useful to have there online. Anyone can just see at a click of a mouse or whatever, because you can't really present all that information on a CV.
Right,
so It's been useful. And I think, I'm actually not a big blogger, but I think it's just useful sometimes to reflect on things that have been going on in your own work, and then think, well, maybe how could I write something that's going to be useful to someone else? So maybe someone's looking for a list of editing books, so I produced a blog post listing out all my recommendations for editing books. It's just a sort of time to time thing for me. But I mean, I'd say for anyone who's looking to move on out of teaching, a blog can be really, really useful. So publishers do come across individuals' blogs, and sometimes they think, wow, this person's getting a lot of traffic and they've actually got some really interesting ideas. Maybe we could approach them to do some writing for us. So yeah, I've known a few people who've got into publishing through their blogs. So again, I think it depends on how serious you want to take this. So if you've got a real professional mindset and you want to grow and you want to expand into other areas, a blog could be a really good tool, and might just even if it's not updated regularly, just somewhere where people can go and find out a bit more about you, I think is really useful. So
excellent. No, thank you for that. Right, so let's get to.
I mean, I think you maybe have more insight of what it's like to run a blog yourself, because you post a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I didn't start the blog with the thought in mind for work. It wasn't, okay, I'm gonna do this so I can get a job, or it wasn't, so I'm gonna make myself visible. No, I had ideas that I wanted to share that focused on teaching at the time, and my experience with Delta and things like that. And then it sort of just snowballed into a bit of everything now. So yeah, and I just really enjoy it. I find that the more that I contribute, the more that I get back from not only from people that read the blog, but other bloggers as well. I've built up a massive community of people that I speak to often, about certain things, and it's actually landed me opportunities for work. So, for example, now I work for Cambridge University Press and Cambridge Assessment as a freelance teacher trainer, and one of the reasons was my conferences, but one of the things that was kind of sealed the deal was my blog, and it was, that it has helped me. So I'm very glad that I made that decision, many years ago to take it on.
Yeah, and I think another aspect I think you've got to think about is that publishers like people who are going to promote their own work. So, if you've authored something and you're a regular blogger, you're probably going to write about the work that you've done. Yeah. So it's kind of offering free promotion for the publishers as well. So publishers are very attracted to blogs for that reason as well.
Yeah. Something that's just occurred to me, your actual job as an editor, as a copy editor, and as a proofreader, where are you in the process? So, for example, when there's a course book that's written, I imagine there's a brief that's sent out to the writers. Then the writers do their stuff. They get blah blah blah. They write their stuff, and then it comes to you. Is that the next part, or does it go through the publisher a few times and then it's sent to you for copy? How does it work?
Yeah, it all depends on the project, and it all depends on how much time or how little time the in-house staff have to handle it. So, I mean, these days, I think, as I saw in your interview with Karen and Sue, these days publishers are keen to get books out as quickly as possible. So generally what will happen, as you said, the authors will get briefed. They will start to write something, and then the first person who will see it is the development editor. Right. So the development editor could be freelance or it could be in-house. So the development editor is involved in shaping the content. So if the topics are not great and the development editor has some ideas how they could be improved, the development editor will feed back to the author with those ideas. The development editor will also be checking for things like market appropriateness, age appropriateness, level appropriateness. So they have quite a big role in shaping the content. So they might be dealing directly with the authors, going toing and froing through various drafts to get that done. So once all the content is determined as complete, and usually in-house will decide when it's complete, then it will go to a copy editor, or in the US they sometimes call them a line editor. So they will then have to make the text consistent with other levels. So if other levels are using look at the picture, select the best option, that kind of wording they need to ensure is consistent across the levels. So that's the copy editor or line editor's job. And then you've got the proofreader, who's purely checking for remaining spelling and grammar issues, or if it's an Americanizer, they will be checking that the language is appropriate for American audiences. So yeah, different levels of editing, content development, copy editing, and then proofreading. And then after the work is published, you even have a cold reader who will check that everything's been typeset correctly, and that there are still no errors in the book, because I'm sure we've all seen books that have been published and they've still got errors in them. So different levels of editing, also different pay rates, and also different levels of expertise. So not everyone who proofreads maybe are confident to do content development. So again, you need to think about your skill set area. And again, if you're a content developer, you don't need to worry about proofreading. So that's where I said the training and the editing certifications are not so important. So depends on your skill set, but those are the main editing roles in working on a project.
There's so much more than I actually realized. I see even the difference between, for example, a copy editor and a proofreader. I think the general idea, at least mine, before I started sort of researching and understanding it, a few of the things, is and I did some proofreading work some time ago on some work, that was kind of proofreading, but also looking at the difference, making things consistent and other things. Very.
Well, that's the new role. So the latest term is proof editing, So again,
editing,
publishers who
right.
are just like in a rush to get everything out, they might sort of merge the roles. So it's really important when you start. I think, I don't know who was talking about briefs. I think that was Karen or Sue. So it's really important that you have a very clear brief
Right.
at the start of any project in terms of what your remit on that project is.
Right. That's well, so much in there. It seems like there's a lot of opportunities though. And speaking about opportunities, so let's say you have teachers. I suppose we're looking at teachers now. I'm these are obviously focused at ELT professionals. I find it difficult that people that aren't with an ELT are going to see these videos, but so let's maybe focus on teachers now. If teachers find that they've been teachers for a while, they've heard about editing or materials writing, and maybe they realize perhaps content development is not for them. Maybe they like the editing route.
Or the project managing route.
Or the project managing. So I suppose I have a few things. What would be your advice for them? Two aspects. One would be getting experience, and two, where to start. Do you have any points of advice for those points?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of advice, but I think it goes back, earlier I said, there are two routes. Either you want to move in-house with a publisher as your employer, or you want to maybe combine teaching with materials development and editing. And you were talking about, you're worried about we're excluding other types of teachers, but this is just as applicable to schools teachers. I mean, there's a lot of work available in schools publishing these days. So it's kind of the same type of advice. So yeah, if you want to go in-house, I think just start applying to in-house roles when you see vacancies pop up. But I think, yeah, be clear on what your background is, and that you can you can offer the skills for that role. So collect worksheets that you've made, sort of try and bring together some kind of portfolio around materials that you've made. I'm going to go through a list here. Is that all right?
Hit me.
Okay. So I think so that there's that aspect. Yeah, just go ahead and start applying. That could be one way about it. If you want to combine teaching with some writing or editing on the side, then it's maybe a slightly more complex process in terms of the sort of the experience path that you go through. So I think first of all, it's really good to find out about the industry. So such as, we're discovering now that there are different types of editing roles. That's probably something most teachers aren't aware of. So learn about the industry. What does it actually, or what is actually the way to create and deliver a manuscript to a publishing company? So how does it actually work? I think people would be surprised at how things actually work. So try and find out about that. Find out about the different types of editing and publishing roles. As we've said, you might not necessarily do proofreading, but there are other roles available. Think about your own specialist area. I mean, I don't have a niche, which is a disadvantage, but you said, for example, you are involved with Cambridge assessment in terms of teacher training, which I assume is on the exam side. So perhaps say you've been an IELTS teacher, the IELTS exam inside out, that could be your specialist area.
Right.
Maybe you've taught in the Middle East. That's quite a high demand specialist area. Publishing for the Middle East markets is very, very specific. So if you've had first-hand experience teaching in the Middle East, you could really offer a lot to publishers there. Maybe you've had experience with autistic learners, or people with dyslexia. That could be a specialism that you work on in terms of published materials. Or maybe you're just really good at typing, the IPA phonetic script. So, that could be something that you specialize in. So think about your specialism if you have one, because that can really help. And I think a key thing is just networking. So find out who's working in publishing, attend conferences, go and visit the publisher stands. I mean, every country has, ELT conference events. and publishers are always there. I think just be aware though that some of the publishers attending, they send these sales reps as opposed to editorial staff. So you might not be connecting directly with the people who matter in-house in terms of assigning work. But I mean, as we've suggested, you know, if you've got a website, get some business cards, you know, tell them that you're interested in connecting with the in-house team, you're keen on writing or editing, you know, hand over your business cards with your website on. That's really good.
Yeah.
And you know, there are lots of groups that you can join. So I think the best one, at least if you're in the UK, is the MORSIG group. So that's the Materials and Writers Special Interest Group of the IATEFL organisation. So I mean, they have really good networking events, both online and face to face. You know, you can participate, you know, get your name out there, get yourself known, find out who's who, and don't be afraid to ask people questions when you attend these groups or join these groups. Another group that's worth getting involved in if you're serious about wanting to take on more work, even if you're quite a novice at this, is joining the ELT Publishing Professionals group. So Karen and Sue, who you've had a chat with previously, they run that group. So you pay about £50 a year, but you can have a listing in the directory, and I think that's really helpful. And another group I'll give a shout out here to, I have to apologize if I get the pronunciation wrong, to Atena Jusko. So she runs the ELT Freelancers Hub Facebook page, and that's a really good page to ask questions and to keep an eye out on job spots, because I think, you know, these days it's not just about the big publishers. There are lots of different types of ELT publishers out there. So particularly with the pandemic, we've had a lot of online companies looking for people to help support in the creation and editing of materials. So, you know, don't just think about the obvious publishers. There's lots of different companies out there. So yeah, you probably have to start small before you move up to the bigger groups. But I mean, you know, the smaller groups can be pretty good and offer some interesting positions. And, you know, talking of the pandemic, I think these days, you know, another area that teachers could consider is something like, you know, UX design, so user experience design. You know, it's quite a different area from teaching, but a lot of teachers now are quite tech savvy, and they might be interested in helping to develop tech products for education companies. So that's another role. I'm getting through quite a few items here, so hopefully we can keep track of them. I mean, it's networking, joining groups, understanding the industry, so find out about the different roles. Also, you've got to think about the business aspect, so find out about pay rates, find out what's fair. You know, I don't think a lot of teachers think about that if they're developing materials, because they probably just, you know, develop materials unpaid for their own school and their own teaching. So that's another area. Plus, something else really important is to be good at Word and Adobe Acrobat. So, you know, if you can use Word well, that's really important. Otherwise, you're going to take a long time working on a manuscript. So you need to know the sort of tips and tricks there. And another thing I would recommend is maybe to find like an Eddie buddy or a writing buddy. So find someone who's at a similar stage to you in terms of, you know, wanting to develop more as a writer or an editor. Partner up with them, you know, get feedback from them on your own work, because I think, you know, as a teacher creating materials, we often work in our own sort of bubble. We don't get feedback even from students about our worksheets that we create and so on. So it's quite hard to develop and know how we can do better. So yeah, partner up with someone who might be interested in the same thing as you. So
that sounds like really good advice.
Just finally, last one, LinkedIn. So I think LinkedIn is actually where I get most of my work from people who I don't know. So
Really?
rather than the blog or the website, which you asked about earlier, LinkedIn's been a really important source for me. So yeah, having a good profile on there, you know, commenting on other people's posts, and again, finding people with similar interests has been really helpful for me. And then just final, because I saw on your table, something else you could consider as a stepping stone is writing for, you know, magazines or journals. So most of them are unpaid, but I mean, it can be a good outlet to get seen and to professionally formulate some of your ideas from teaching. And again, some publishers do read these journals and magazines, and you know, that's how they can discover new talent, as it were.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. I haven't actually received mine. This is the last issue.
Oh right, yes.
I haven't received mine yet, but I'm waiting for it. Hopefully soon. Well, massive amounts of advice there, and I mean, you've given very clear pointers. As I said, it's like a very clear thing. At least loads of advice to get started. I imagine putting everything into practice takes time and work, but thank you very much for those bits of advice. Now, in terms of, you know, we spoke about things that you can do sort of by yourself, and that's generally books, I suppose. Are there any sort of 2 or 3 book recommendations that you have that sort of come to mind as, okay, this is a good book to read if you're looking to get into editing or copy editing or proofreading? Are there sort of any that, and I'm assuming it's not going to be the APA 7th edition as you in one of your blog posts that you mentioned. It was very interesting. I had a look through it. It was very interesting. But are there any others that perhaps that you would recommend to people looking, or professionals looking to move into that?
Yeah, so I mean, the APA becomes important if you move into academic editing. But for ELT editing, I mean, I'd actually go back before editing. I would actually look at, I mean, you already had Sue and Karen on. So the ELT Teacher to Writer series is one that I would immediately go to. So even if you're not writing, I think for editors as well, books in that series are really useful for ideas and things that you need to think about when you're working with a manuscript. So that books from that series would be my first port of call. But if you are specifically wanting to go into editing, I think a good starting point for books is one that's by Amy Einson. So maybe we'll put a link to it or something.
See, after it's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, so Amy Einson, it's called The Copy Editor's Handbook, and you can buy an associated workbook with it that's published by the University of California Press. So you could get those 2 books. I think that's a good starting point. It kind of takes you from ground zero of editing, and you can work through some exercises to sort of get a good idea of the basics. So Amy Einson, The Copy Editor's Handbook. Also, if you're wanting to work as a freelance editor, I find the books by Louise Harnby very interesting. So she's always got some really great advice for editors. Most of her work's in fiction editing, but I do find her advice just as useful for working in a different field. So yeah, Louise Harnby books, I love those. And yeah, I think if you really want like a list of books, we can put a link to my blog post on.
Yeah, I will do.
Books.
I will do.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, so much information now to unpack. I definitely think it's not something that I would like to move into.
Because
I don't know. It seems like a lot of time looking at the niggly parts. And I like doing that, but for a short amount of time. Like I said, on the small project that I worked on, it was a very informal thing. And I got tired. For me, it was, I think I would be much better at the content creation and looking at ideas and then getting feedback on that and working on that to something that could be implemented in the classroom. But the going through, checking other stuff, other people's work, and making all the changes, it was a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and that was a very small thing. You know, it was very small. So
imagine like if if someone doesn't like the content, you've got to do it all again within like 48 hours. You know, it's tough. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So deadlines, another big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not good with deadlines, then forget editing. Really. I think even forget writing. I mean, if you're writing for publishers, you know, they want people who are reliable. So
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, excellent. Well, Zoe, you have given us so much information, and like you said, you know, I spoke to Karen Sue from ELT Teacher to Writer, and this just builds on really nicely, and gives, you know, a deep perspective of another aspect in the publishing and editorial world. You know, the editors, the copy editing and proof editing area, and you know, for me, that's someone that doesn't have any experience with this. But is looking to provide teachers, you know, with insights into it. It's really interesting to see how big this world is and how much work there is that goes into it and how important each of the people are. You know, so your role in there is vital in that whole process. And then you know, you look at the different roles: the writer, you know, you have the other editors, and then your roles. It's just it's a massive machine that comes together to create these projects. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize, you know, you flick through a new book within seconds and you're like, oh yeah. And you just don't realize how much work has gone on all those pages.
Yeah. Well, Zoe, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute privilege. I do hope that we get to see each other again, hopefully work on some more projects again in the future. Until then, I will let you go and hopefully survive the sweltering heat that's in the UK. Okay, and we'll see each other again soon. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and you know, your series is really great. I think that in itself is going to encourage other teachers to think about what content they can contribute out there as well.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Zoe. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Zoe. Bye.
Okay, goodbye.